Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be doing an episode of Movie Spotlight. And I thought this was appropriate today because Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original 1990 film, just turned 30 years old. And it's really probably one of my favorite kind of superhero-y films. I don't really want to call it a superhero film because it's kind of an offshoot. I always considered Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as kind of like an offshoot of superheroes, not necessarily superheroes, because they were weird, but they were really just ninjas. They just happened to be turtles. So it's a little bit different. And the other thing is that I love the fact that Jim Henson's company worked on this film. For the turtle costumes, and I think they did some stuff with the Shredder costume, maybe a little bit, but mostly the turtles and the animatronics for the puppetry on the turtles, because again, they have to talk, so you have to have some kind of a mechanism in there to make their mouth open and close, and there was a bunch of different things they could do. They could like squint the eyes, and they could do various things. The special effects on those costumes is amazing, even though by the end of the film you can kind of pick out a few little scenes where you can tell the costumes were starting to fall apart, especially with that last battle with Shredder. But the thing is that Teenage Mutant, the first TMNT movie did not, the 1991 didn't really, it didn't do the kid-friendly thing necessarily. That wasn't really I wouldn't have called it a kid-friendly movie, not an extremely kid-friendly movie. It wasn't it wasn't G-rated or anything like that. If anything, I can't remember if the original was PG-13. It might have been, although more likely it was probably PG. But the thing is that if you look at the old TMNT comics, and I'm saying that because it's saying Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and trying to keep your train of thought is a little off, so I'm just going to keep using the acronym. But the thing is that the original comics were very graphic and violent. They weren't really aimed necessarily at smaller kids like what the later 80s television show was. And then the comics adapted to fit that narrative. But originally they were very violent. There were I think there were comic pages where they were using guns at some point, but it was more brutal. It was a lot more brutal than what would come after it for a very long time. And the thing with that original thing is that bled over into that original movie to an extent. I don't want to say extremely because obviously, the turtles in the movie, they're not shooting people or doing anything, but it bled over because they actually use the weapons. You can actually see that there are impacts and stuff going on. Raphael almost gets killed in the middle of the film. There's a lot going on there that you wouldn't have seen in that 80s television show, and it would have been a bit of a departure for that. The other reason why I really like it too is because they lose that in the sequels. They lose that kind of more violent tone. I think in the second one, Leonardo and Raphael don't even take their weapons out, which is weird. But it was because, Leonardo had the swords and Raphael had the sais. So those were considered a lot more dangerous than the nunchucks and the bow staff. So they decided to tone it down when they did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, and then the third one just kind of sucked. So there really wasn't even a question about what they removed and what they didn't. It just wasn't good. Which is kind of another reason why I really like the first one. And the other thing is they don't do that thing that a lot of superhero movies would do after the fact. Especially recently, and that's you have the setup movie before the movie you really want to see. With TMNT, it was the first movie. You got all the turtles, you got April O'Neil, you got Casey Jones, and they're fighting the Shredder. You basically had everything but Rocksteady and Bebop, and I forget the alien guy in the stomach of the robot thing is, but the base stuff you need for the Turtles, which is Turtles, April, Casey, and Shredder, you have all those things. and they made it work. A very simple story. It required a little bit of suspension of disbelief, where a woman is inviting four mutated human-sized turtles into her house to eat pizza. But again, it was the late '80s, early '90s. But that's the thing, is I really do love that about it. Is it feels like an underground movie almost. It feels kind of like an independent film, and it was for a little while into its production until it got picked up. And I think got picked up by New Line Cinema, if I remember correctly, although I could be wrong about that. But it was an independent production for a little bit of it, and obviously the Henson Group were helping out, with the animatronics and some of the costumes and stuff like that. And then the rest was just, them trying to get this thing done. And it's a great little story of like a movie that came together and became popular and was good. And it, to be honest, actually, it was kind of probably the last role that Corey Feldman had that was worth anything, because he does the voice for Donatello. But the other thing is that this movie kind of established that the Ninja Turtles were around to stay as a franchise. It wasn't just this one-off like kid show in the '80s and a comic line that went so. So this movie kind of started the whole franchise, because after this you had obviously the two sequels. Then you had the animated film as well. You had several television iterations. I think they're on their fourth one now. So there's a lot going on that movie really kind of spurred on. Because again, if that movie had failed, if that first movie had just tanked horribly, then they wouldn't have had the franchise that they did after the fact. Even though the sequels to the first film were not as good as it. But again, it's one of those things that you kind of you can't quantify, but looking back on it, it's like if you screwed up here, this all would have been messed up. It's kind of like the same idea as like if Iron Man had failed out of the gate, the MCU never would have happened. Similar idea. Now the other thing is that I like the fight choreography in it. They make the turtle fighting believable, and that's the other thing that I feel like you have a serious problem with when you have costumes. Which again, I give so much credit to the Jim Henson people and whoever the costume guys were on that film, whoever was working on those suits, because they do some decent fast moves in those suits. I mean, it's not Bruce Lee. It's nothing outstanding, but it looks like they're actually doing stuff, as opposed to it looks like somebody fumbling around in a suit. It could have very easily been a Godzilla situation, where it just looks like a guy flailing around in a costume, or a villain from Power Rangers or something. But they actually look and react very, very well, and it helps the film. It helps with the believability of what you're seeing. Again, everything except for Splinter, but I understand that, because it was a limited puppet. It wasn't a person inside of it. It was actually a puppeteer, I think, for a majority of it. So that would be kind of hard to manipulate, but at the same time, you kind of get it. And then obviously Shredder is a real person, so he can just do his own, type of thing. The costume just has to hold up, which it does. But like I said, that's great. The jokes and the humor in the movie are amazing. I love the humor in it. It's so much. That's the other thing though, is the movie did combine elements that worked from the television show. It combined a lot of the humor, in terms of the pizza and all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that kids were really familiar with from the television show. And Shredder too, obviously being the main antagonist in the comics and in the show, and obviously translated over into the film. But they really do a good job at kind of getting you invested in the Shredder isn't a throwaway guy in this film. He's not like he is in the cartoon, where he's kind of like a literal cartoon, as opposed to what he is in this, where he's very intimidating. So again, you kind of have that compare and contrast, but the look is still very similar to the television one. So they take a lot of elements from various parts of the Turtle franchise, from the comic books and from the actual show, and combined it into something that basically pleased both audiences, which is almost unheard of. But again, I like the tone. I like the middling. I like the comedy. The acting by all of the voice actors. You know, Corey Feldman's kind of weird again, just because you know it's Corey Feldman and he's not actually putting on a voice. But aside from that, they all do a great job. The acting is really good. Casey Jones is fucking hilarious. Just some of the crap that he comes up with, and then he knocks a guy's head off with a driver, or or he smashes him in the head. I can't remember if he actually decapitates him when he does that, which again is kind of a very morbid and weird joke. Um, but he uses like a driver and just knocks a guy's face in. But again, I can't recommend it enough. It's great. If you love the comic, it's great. If you love the TV show, it's great. It establishes everything that we like to know about the turtles, and it set the tone for a lot of stuff moving forward. So again, if you're a fan, I cannot recommend it highly enough. Even if you're not a fan, it's still a fun movie. Again, I've had this conversation before on the channel about movies that you can watch over and over again versus movies that you can only watch every once in a while. And this is one of those ones that I could binge watch. I could just keep repeating over and over and over again because it's a fun film. It's a really fun film. But I want to know what you think. Do you guys like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990? Are you? I can't. I hate the fact that I have to say 1990 because they did a remake. But do you like the movie? Did you grow up with it? Are you a fan? Are you not a fan? Do you think that that's the best version of the Turtles? Do you like some of the other film versions or cartoon versions better? I'd like to know what you think in the thoughts below. And again, as usual, hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?